Understanding the truth around COVID has become a very complex thing. Are there COVID lies that need to be unpacked?
There was an email sent to you from an executive at EcoHealth Alliance, and this is one of the companies that funded some of the research at the Wuhan lab. And this email thanked you for basically saying you believed that the origins of the coronavirus were natural.
We've already discovered that a theory that it came from a lab has gone from being banned on Facebook. We had a video demonetized for precisely that reason. And the relationships between Big Pharma and media, their big advertising spenders, probably prevents truth ever being correctly conveyed. Let's have a look at where we are now with coronavirus, our social political narratives, and are we being lied to on an enormous scale? If they're lying about this, what else are they lying about?
This theory about the lab, the theory that a virus leaked from the lab in Wuhan, was once very much on the fringe of science, but it's now, certainly in the US, being seen as a mainstream possible explanation for the pandemic.
How I see that is not that it sort of moved from the fringes into the mainstream. I feel like it was initially quashed and denied, primarily because it positioned science awkwardly. If science and progress are the solution to all of our problems, then it's important that pharmaceutical companies and science more generally can be presented as the solution to the problem of coronavirus. If science caused coronavirus by gain of function experimentation, meddling in the Lord's domain, then our whole cultural narrative as science and progress as the driving force between human endeavour, that starts to collapse and fall apart.
This is the fact checker at the Washington Post offering an explanation. Early efforts to spotlight a lab leak often got mixed up with speculation that the virus was deliberately created as a bioweapon.
One way to sort of quash that kind of speculation would be absolute transparency, not repressing information because it wasn't convenient. Now, I'll mention again, a report in 2017 showed that with the exception of CBS, every American major media outlet shared at least one board member with at least one pharmaceutical company. That means there's literal physical crossovers between the media and pharmaceutical companies, the same human beings. Furthermore, drug companies spent $5 billion a year on advertising with these media outlets. Consider the amount of profits that Pfizer are likely to make from the vaccines. Moderna was a company in a lot of trouble before these vaccines came about. And Johnson & Johnson are going to need every penny they make from the vaccines to pay for lawsuits coming about as a result of their talcum powder causing cancer. And it does make me think, if they can't manage talcum powder, I don't know if I want them dealing with vaccines.
That made it easier for many scientists to dismiss the lab scenario as tin hat nonsense.
Doesn't it make you think what other things that are being dismissed as tin hat nonsense are also potentially true? Doesn't it make you realise that what's necessary from the media is not to toe the line in accordance with their big partnerships with pharmaceutical companies and their relationships with government, but to commit themselves to truth? Otherwise, you can't trust them on anything.
With the exception of CBS, every major media outlet in the United States shares at least one board member with at least one pharmaceutical company. Let me put that into perspective. These board members wake up, they go to a meeting at Merck or Pfizer, then they have their driver take them over to a meeting with NBC to decide what kind of programming that network is going to air.
So of course there's a financial ties between the media and Big Pharma. But deeper than that, there are ideological ties. The ideological tie that defines our time, that science and progress is what defines the human journey. If science is not the solution to COVID, but potentially the cause of COVID, that reframes our entire narrative, our entire strident march for greater and greater progress, our reliance on big tech and big tech billionaires and genii. All of that suddenly has to be questioned because of this breach in the accepted narrative.
Here in the country, which saw the first coronavirus clusters, the government has vigorously denied any responsibility for the pandemic. The problem for the rest of the world is that the hunt for the origins of the virus has become so overtly political.
Another perspective is that The media, of course, are highly partisan, and that partisanship affects their objectivity, even in areas where you wouldn't imagine that it ought to, not even when not specifically talking about party politics. The lab leak theory, it says in the New York Times, was associated early on with Republican China hawks, given prominence by conservative publications and eventually picked up by the Trump administration. There was self-reinforcing pressure among journalists who covered the story and Twitter experts who opined on it to put the possibility in the QAnon box and leave it there. Well, that shouldn't happen. That makes me wonder what else is in the QAnon box that shouldn't be there. Also, when you hear it explained like this, the theory that it came from a lab was always circumstantially plausible, given that the outbreak started more than 1,000 miles from the bat habitat where similar viruses have been discovered, but a stone's throw from an important laboratory studying coronaviruses was treated as pure conspiracizing by mainstream news outlets and Facebook content warning providers for too long. I mean, that is extraordinary, isn't it? Like, and kind of ridiculous. Again, makes you question what other motives are there other than reporting the news. Here is some information. Here is some information. It's not just that, is it? It's not an open channel. It's a channel that's blocked by all kind of interests and biases. In fact, increasingly, it looks like truth is not even a component. Of course, journalism has a rich heritage and heroes in it, you know, like the Watergate scandal and even more recently Glenn Greenwald and Edward Snowden, like incredible campaigns and exposés by people in that field and profession. But more latterly, it's clearly become a tool for numerous cultural reasons, I'm sure, of the establishment. The same New York Times journalist says, in the Trump era, there was an impulse to tell the reader exactly what to think, lest by leaving anything ambiguous, you gave an inch to right-wing demagoguery. Well, that's not right, is it? Like the idea that that has to be done, that you have to bleach away the possibility of contemplation. Don't you have any trust in people? Like that, if you're right, you just tell the truth, and that's going to be enough. Like, hey, listen, the Trump folk are saying this thing, and yeah, it might be true, actually. Like, what's so terrible about that? No, it's Trump, everything's evil, no, it's wrong. It's like, you know, now you've become the very thing that you are purportedly opposing. Editorializing, lying propagandists, and in this case, an enemy of truth and a threat and danger to the lives of ordinary people.
It can take anywhere from 3 days to a full week before the media reports on a drug or a medical device recall, if they report on it at all. In the case of Invokana, for example, it took 32 days before media outlets reported about an FDA warning about the product creating too much acid in the bloodstream. The FDA began warning about the dangers of Cook IVC filters as early as 2010, and then it took 5 years before the media started paying any attention to that.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because I suppose what that is evidence of a disjunct between the required transparency of the media and the actual way that news is reported, particularly in regard to pharmaceutical products. And we know there is a long history of pharmaceutical companies behaving irresponsibly, of prioritizing profit over the health of their customers. If they are further abetted in this negligence by media partners that will either obscure or entirely neglect that information, it means that we have even greater cause for cynicism and doubt. This is a case history. That's what you can look at, is this as. You can say, this is what happened previously. Based on what happened previously, what do you think's happening now? If in the past they were dishonest about pharmaceutical companies, or they corroborated scientific negligence through their lack of reporting, what do you think they're doing now? If initially they ignored the story that could have come, that the coronavirus could have been started in a laboratory, why would we not at least consider other, more extreme ideas? Why would we not? Because of the same media? Because of the same government interests? For me, that is the real challenge. You do open the door to more extreme ideas. You can't, by crushing it, you do the opposite. The quote that appears in the comments a lot is from the Game of Thrones one. When you cut out a man's tongue, you don't tell people that you dominate him, just that you fear what he might have to say. Sorry for mangling that. I know a lot of you really like that quote. But the fact is this kind of censorship causes more doubt, not less.
Drug companies spend about $5 billion a year on advertising with these media outlets. So when you have a case against Pfizer or Merck or Eli Lilly or any of the other major pharmaceutical companies, do you think those board members are going to let you get on the air and tell a story that's bad about what they do? Or are you naive enough to believe that they really don't interfere with the day-to-day operation?
And it's not just mainstream media, it's social media. Facebook, of course, put a content warning and in some cases demonetized content that reported Nicholas Wade's theory that it could have come from a lab, that coronavirus could have come from a lab. In fact, we had a video demonetized for precisely that reason. So because information is censored or referred to as conspiratorial, that don't mean it's not true. That just means people don't want you to believe it.
I sent a message to the Prime Minister at 7:48 that morning, and forgive the language that this is expressed in, but I might as well just say what I actually said.
In the UK, where I live, Dominic Cummings, former high-level government advisor, has recently been dropping bombs on his former ally Boris Johnson, which gives us a rare insight into the architecture of government. Obviously, Cummings is an experienced media player, so everything he says has been through a pretty sophisticated filter, I would say. But let's have a look at some of his public revelations about what's been happening in the UK to see if we can speculate about the type of things that might go on more broadly.
We've got big problems coming. The Cabinet Office is terrifyingly shit, no plans, totally behind the pace. We must announce today, not next week. If you feel ill with cold or flu, stay home. Some around the system want a delay because they haven't done the work.
He should be more worried about his digestive system, who's burping his way through his entire statement.
We must force the pace. We're looking at 100 to 500,000 deaths between optimistic and pessimistic scenarios.
What I think about this is it's just interesting to recognise, because of the sheens of branding and propaganda behind which government operates, you never sort of think of them, unless if you're watching like an Armando Iannucci sort of show like Thick of It or Veep or whatever. Hold on a minute, these are just people going, oh no, this thing's happening, oh what are we going to do? Just put that out, keep that out of the way, ah! You know, they're just human beings. That's what kind of makes a mockery of it.
We then got completely derailed because in the morning of the 12th, suddenly the national security people came in and said, Trump wants us to join a bombing campaign in the Middle East tonight.
It's funny, because it sort of sounds like, do you want to go over the park? Do you want to do a bombing campaign in the Middle East? No, stop bombing the Middle East. Leave them alone.
And then to add to it sounds so surreal it couldn't possibly be true. That day, the Times had run a huge story about the Prime Minister and his girlfriend and their dog. And the Prime Minister's girlfriend was going completely crackers about this story and demanding that the press office deal with that.
There was a bit of me that is sort of curious about what that story is, though. What did that dog do?
So we had this sort of completely insane situation in which part of the building was saying, are we going to bomb Iraq? Part of the building was arguing about whether or not we're going to do quarantine or not do quarantine. The Prime Minister has his girlfriend going crackers about something completely trivial.
Sadly, we all got very confused and ended up bombing the Prime Minister's dog with COVID. Luckily, it got better.
Nobody could find a way around the problem of the Prime Minister just like a shopping trolley smashing from one side of the aisle into the other. For him, he just gets up, reads the papers, says, right, what are they doing today? And then cannons around.
Actually, lick his finger. He shouldn't be doing that. I hope he washed his hands afterwards. That was the main thing they were saying.
Number 10 was not operating on a war footing in February on this in any way, shape or form. Lots of key people were literally skiing in the middle of February.
That's mad, isn't it? They're all off on holiday and that. When people say, oh no, you know, we've arrived at the best system of government, you haven't, have you? If it's all like people worrying about their dogs and off on skiing holidays and licking their fingers and sticking them in the air, we're way off. I can think of a few areas for immediate improvement. Don't go on holiday. Always have people there ready to run things in constant communication. Don't worry about the dogs in the public eye domain. Stop licking your finger.
The Secretary of State for Health should have been fired for at least 15, 20 things, including lying to everybody in multiple occasions, in meeting after meeting in the Cabinet room and publicly. I think there's no doubt at all that many senior people performed far, far disastrously below the standards which the country has a right to expect.
I suppose what it shows you is something that you should understand, that even when you're dealing with a pandemic, a global situation that involves pharmaceutical companies, the world media, and every single one of us, with the perception of truth shifting as time goes on, that the people that are in charge are not sort of like channels of pure consciousness with nothing in their minds and hearts but the well-being of the world's population. They're flawed individuals with all kinds of prejudices and biases and pre-existing relationships with people. Oh, like, you will do a deal, you can make PPE, or you better not tell anybody that. I'm worried about my dog.
In April, we had this terrible pledge which was hugely distorting the whole system. We also had constant repeated lying about PPE. The Cabinet Secretary said to the Prime Minister in almost the first meeting when he came back, "Prime Minister, the British system is not set up to deal with a Secretary of State who repeatedly lies in meetings."
Yes, it is. That's exactly what it's been set up for. There's always been some version of that. When you start to look at the accumulation of incompetence, ineptitude, the sort of bogus, peculiar relationships, the disingenuity, the relationships between Big Pharma and the media, it scares me. It makes me more open to hear the results of other people's independent research, people that aren't financially tied up with pharmaceutical companies or media or big business. It makes me query, oh, why has this thing been banned? Why are you not allowed to talk about this theory? It makes me open to those ideas. I think we should be open to them. I think that decisions about lockdowns, quarantines, vaccines should be made, again, it's like with democracy, on the basis that they're telling us that those decisions are being made on. This is scientifically beneficial for all of you. We've got absolutely nothing to hide. We can trust these organisations. They've not done anything in the past that leads us to worry about them. We don't have any muddy or peculiar relationships between each other that prevent us from being clear and honest and open with you. It's all cool. That's not what's happening.
The government rhetoric was, we put a shield around care homes and blah, blah, blah. It was complete nonsense. Quite the opposite of putting a shield around them. We sent people with COVID back to the care homes.
Thank you.
She said, thank you for doing that. We sent her back to the curbs. Thank you, because I hate my nan.
Thank you. That's extraordinary.
I spoke before one of those things. They're not doing anything. This is all big circle jerk of nonsense. Obviously, if you want real change will not come from within institutions that have as their primary function self-preservation, whether those institutions are economic, financial ones, corporate ones, or government ones. They are predicated on self-sustenance and offer us, limited change within that small space. You can have these people, but this structure that underwrites it cannot alter it, and the structure that overwrites it cannot alter either.
When the public needed us most, the government failed. And I'd like to say to all the families of those who died unnecessarily, how sorry I am for the mistakes that were made and for my own mistakes at that.
Nearly made himself cry there a little bit, didn't he? Probably have to do another trip to old Barnard Castle see if the eyes are working now. Yep, they're working. They're good as gold. I'm feeling my emotions again. Well, look, Dominic Cummings, just a human being. What a giddy, silly, inept, dishonest, disingenuous, peculiar, complex mess. And I suppose, as I've said before, the implication is that we have to do our own research, as you say, and be clear and transparent with one another. I certainly will be approaching all matters related to this subject prudently, judiciously, calmly. Like, even though I'm talking about some controversial ideas here, I'm not trying to make this any more incendiary. I've tried to remember that this is a person-to-person situation. We're dealing with relationships and fears and people with different priorities and different concerns. And the only way to navigate such a choppy territory is with kind of clemency and compassion and understanding and non-judgment of one another on a human level, but a different kind of discernment when it comes to dealing with powerful media, powerful pharma, powerful government. I mean pharmaceutical, not powerful type farmers, just for the sake of clarity. Well, if you enjoyed that video, and I hope you did, please press like and post it around and subscribe. And please go to russellbrand.com and join up to my mailing list. I'm doing some live shows in the UK. You could come check me live, and it'll be post restrictions. It'll be like a maskless, interactive affair. I'd love to see you there. Thanks for watching. Cheers.